Hey everyone, Stevo here. Looks like we had another aircraft accident. This time the results were a little bit better, but pretty close call. You've probably seen the videos. It's pretty ugly up there. That plane ended up upside down in Toronto. With this recent seeming increase in accidents, the question that's going around is flying still safe? And I just so you do know, yes, I'm a Christian author and speaker, but I'm also an airline pilot with about 17,000 hours of experience total. Flew for the military for 20 years as well. I currently fly wide-body jet airplanes for a cargo airline, and I also flew for American Eagle, one of the American commuters, for a while back in the 90s. Another question is, should you be worried the next time you step onto a jet to go on your next vacation or business trip? So let's talk about that. First of all, a big warning about this. I don't like speculating on what has happened when the investigation hasn't been done yet, because I wasn't in that airplane. Just a few little details are coming out, possibly about the nature of the crew, so we're not really going to get deep into this. I'll give you just a little impression of a possibility, but quite frankly, I don't know. We won't know until the investigation is complete. The good news is that the accident rate for the airlines currently is pretty close to zero. We've had so few crashes, so few fatalities. It's a very safe system overall. I would urge calm for the moment, but I will share with you, as an airline pilot, as a former military pilot, I also fly civilian, my own private aircraft, some too, that I do have a few concerns about the safety of aviation going forward. So I do want to talk about that. One of them is just a trend that I see, and I've seen going on for a couple of decades at least, is that I call it pilot brain and skill rot. We've kind of got to this place where airplanes are far more advanced than they used to be. We've integrated computers, and we're probably coming up on integrating some AI into flying. And the autopilots in the flight management systems and the auto throttles are far better than they used to be. It's pretty amazing what they're capable of doing. Looking back, when I first got into aviation, coming out of military pilot training, I was flying with a bunch of guys in my unit who had earned their wings, so to speak, or matured in the Vietnam War. And most of them at the time were flying what I call the Iron Jets. This is the older generations of high-performance large jet aircraft that, although they had amazing performance, they were still very primitive in their instrumentation and autopilots. They were very basically equipped compared to aircraft today. And what used to imagine me, even though I considered myself as a young guy to be a pretty darn good pilot, was when I watched these guys fly. It put me in my place. They were really spectacular. It's like the airplane was on rails. And another surprising thing, although some of these guys were pretty heavy partiers, they knew the regulations, they knew the systems, they knew the aircraft. They were never slackers in any regard when it came to professionalism. If you fast forward to today, what I'm seeing now on multiple levels is very disturbing, and very disturbing going forward. First of all is that we have people, and this is a well-known problem, the FAA is all aware of it, we'll talk about that. We have pilots who really don't know how to fly very well anymore. They sit there and they watch the automation work, they push the buttons, they twist the knobs, they type, and they pretty much just let the airplane fly itself. They've never really developed a substantial body of skill. And here's the thing about manually flying an aircraft that you probably need to know, and that it's a very perishable, high skill set. It takes what we call a rapid scan rate. And in some of the newer airplanes, the scan is simpler because of the flight displays present the information in an easier format, but it's a lot to fly an aircraft in bad weather at night. Gusty winds, thunderstorms, aircraft malfunctions. It's a lot of skill, and you have to practice these things regularly. You need to have your hands on a lot. Some pilots think that it's not really necessary anymore, and they don't do it. However, we're going to find out the FAA came out down on the side of, yeah, you do need to fly. One of the surveys that was done maybe 10 years ago showed that the average professional pilot only flies 3 minutes per flight. And a friend of mine asked me if that was true, and I said, not really, because they're not really flying. What they do, they allow the automation to get the airplane, say on approach. They'll just sit there and do the knobs and the buttons and get the airplane on final with the power set. And what's called trimmed up. So they're pretty much aligned with the runway. And then 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the ground, they'll click off the autopilot and leave the auto throttles on. And then they'll kind of steer the airplane to a little, and they call that flying. The problem is that most of these airplanes, except for some of the newer ones that are a little bit more self-adjusting, is every time on my airplane, when you make a power adjustment, you have to change the pitch, because when you push the power up, the nose goes up. When you pull the power back, the nose goes down. When you put the flaps out, the nose pitches up. When you put the flaps back up, the nose pitches down. You get used to these things when you hand fly a lot, and so you just automatically respond to it. It's just wired into your body. Those days are pretty much gone. I fly with a lot of people today, and when they take the automation off, if they ever do, it's rare. I try to encourage them to. I doubt they could fly to private pilot standards, much less ATP pilot standards. The other thing that is very alarming, that started way back, even before I got into aviation, but it was going big when I was in military pilot training, is that, and I talk about this in my book, Superhero, a little bit, about how there was a different standard for women and minorities than there was for guys. And things that would get a pasty-faced white boy kicked out of training, women, minorities, didn't matter. Almost didn't matter. They could go through so much more extra training, and if they got anywhere close to the standards, they were just passed along through the system. That was bad, but what's even worse is what I suspected would happen has happened, and that is now, because we lowered the standard in one area in order to get the required number of certain categories of people into aviation, now the standard has lowered for everyone, to the point to where several years ago I was an instructor at my airline and flying with a guy, and the winds climbing out were pretty wild, and so the airspeed was going up and down, and this guy was chasing what's called the flight director. He's just making these gross overcorrections. So I finally said, hey man, what should your pitch be to climb at 310 knots here at 12,000 feet? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, I mean, what's your normal pitch coming through 12,000 speed at 300 knots? He's like, I don't understand. The way we've always flown airplanes from probably shortly after the Wright brothers up until I still do, is by what's called pitch and power. You need to know, in case your flight instruments fail, how the airplane can fly if you don't have all the flight instruments. It's a lost concept now for so many people. So what has happened in the long term because of DEI, equal opportunity, whatever you want to call it, is that there was enormous pressure put on the military, upon the civilian airlines, everyone, to hire women and minorities, which is fine, I guess. But the problem is, because there were so few applicants, there was enormous pressure to push everyone through, no matter if they had the skills or not. And eventually, as those who give the check rides and determine whether or not you meet the qualifications, they kind of said, well, if that person's good enough, then why not this person? So the standards overall have lowered for pilots, the expectations of professionalism. One more thing that is just really bad is, with all of our electronic devices today, most young Americans don't have much of an attention span, and I have lots of young friends who tell me this. I say, how's your attention span? The most common answer I'm getting is, I don't have one. One of the problems with that is that without a substantial attention span, you really cannot learn deeply. I'm studying all the time to stay up with my job as an airline pilot. It requires calmness, it requires deep thinking, and that's just something that, with all the distractions of electronics, we don't even have the ability to learn anymore. So we've got a real crisis coming up. So is flying still safe though? Yeah, as long as the pilot, the automation's good. As long as the automation doesn't let out at the wrong time, I guess we're going to be okay. I'm not worried about flying. I ride regularly on the passenger carriers, not real worried about it. Personally, I have Christ, so yeah, if I die, it's a good thing. I'm not going to die without his permission. One more topic to deal with, and this is just because President Trump brought it up after the crash in D.C., the mid-air collision. He said that this was a DEI-related thing. At first, I thought maybe that was an inappropriate time to bring that up, and then again, let's just talk about that, though. DEI is playing a role in the way we train pilots, the way we certify pilots, and of course, obviously, ATC. What's come out about ATC hiring practices that instead of someone having to meet the standards, they just needed to meet the approved category of person. You had to be the certain gender, a certain skin color, whatever it was that they were looking for. And talking to a buddy of mine who works for the FAA, and what he said was, hey man, it was just sad that people couldn't pass the test. They're just pushing them through to get the required numbers. Here's just the thing about whether you're an ATC, aircraft mechanic, a pilot, the only thing that matters in aviation is, can you do the job? This is a life and death game. It's like the medical profession. You don't want to meet certain qualifications in the dominant or recessive nature of the melanin in their skin, because that has nothing to do with flying. That does not matter. What matters is, in all of these aviation jobs, can you do the job? Going forward, what I say that we need to do as the flying public, what we need to do as pilots, as mechanics, as ATC personnel, FAA personnel, is that we need to stop being afraid of being called names by the people who promote this garbage. This is life and death. If you want to sit there and complain about all the intersectionality and oppression and reparations, whatever it is that you think is going to make your life better, those of us who know the truth and who care about human life and the dignity of human life just need to see people as people, not as artificial categories of people. And the only thing that matters in most of life is your ability to do the job. No more so in aviation than perhaps any other profession. You got to be able to do the job safely. Is flying still safe? I'm not real worried about it currently. I just see these trends, and we need to deal with these trends. I'm really sorry about the accident in Toronto. The initial information sounds like it was probably a severe crew error, maybe some crew training going on, and the person doing the training was not really very well qualified. But we'll find out as the accident goes on. I'm not going to say anything more than that. Looks like someone just drove an airplane straight into the ground and broke the wing off. But here's the thing. We have to align with what is true, people. I mean, if you've been buying into this garbage about DEI, equal opportunities, what it used to be called, hey, we're all made in the image of God. Skin color, our sex, the idea that gender is a construct is itself a construct. You're a man or a woman, skin color, who gives a crap? It doesn't matter. When it comes to important jobs, the only thing that matters is, can you do the job safely? So let's go forward with that, y'all. Stevo out.